My name is Evelyn and I'm 68 years old. The phone call that destroyed my daughter-in-law's world wasn't loud or angry. It was quiet, precise, and utterly devastating. "Ma'am," the lawyer's voice said, as cold and sharp as a shard of glass. "This is Mr. Gable. The matriarch clause has been triggered. Effective immediately, you have lost everything." But this story doesn't start with a phone call. It starts a month earlier, with a child's drawing, a front door slammed in my face, and 5 words that turned my heart to stone. For the past 5 years since my husband Richard passed, my world had shrunk to the size of my grandson's smile. Leo was 6 years old, a whirlwind of bright energy and innocent laughter, a perfect fusion of my son Mark and a sunbeam. He was the reason I woke up in the morning. I lived in the beautiful home Richard and I had built, a sprawling house with a garden I had poured my soul into. After Richard, a brilliant and shrewd investor, was gone, I thought the house felt empty. Then Mark and his new wife Sophia moved in. Sophia. She was a masterpiece of modern beauty, flawless skin, a curated Instagram feed, and eyes that held the cold, transactional gleam of a predator. She was a social media lifestyle influencer, a title I never quite understood. She saw my classic, comfortable home not as a place of love and memory, but as a vintage backdrop for her sponsored posts. She saw me not as a mother, but as a free live-in babysitter and a walking, talking bank account. I tolerated it all for Leo. I tolerated Sophia's passive-aggressive comments about my outdated furniture. I tolerated her forgetting her wallet every time we went out. I tolerated my son Mark's weak, apologetic glances as he allowed his wife to treat me like a servant in my own home. My love for Leo was a shield that made me impervious to their disrespect, until that Tuesday. It was Leo's 6th birthday. I had spent a week baking his favourite cake, a complex, multi-layered chocolate creation from my mother's secret recipe. I had bought him the giant, intricate Lego set he had been dreaming of for months. I was humming, filled with a quiet joy, waiting for him to get home from school. The front door opened, and Sophia walked in, her face a mask of thunder. She was holding a crumpled piece of paper. It was a drawing Leo had made at school that day, a colourful, chaotic drawing of his family. There was Mark, there was Sophia, and right in the middle, holding his hand, was a smiling stick figure with grey hair labelled Grandma. "What is this?" Sophia hissed, shoving the drawing in my face. It's Leo's drawing," I stammered. "He loves his grandma." "He's obsessed," she spat, her beautiful face twisted into an ugly snarl. "All he talks about is you. His teachers say he's always telling grandma stories. You are a contamination, Eleanor. You are filling his head with your old-fashioned, simple-minded nostalgia. He needs to be exposed to a more aspirational lifestyle. My lifestyle." I was speechless. "A contamination?" "You heard me," she said, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "You bring nothing of value to his life. You are a relic, a memory of a past he needs to move on from. My son is going to be a winner, a leader. He can't be held back by you." At that moment, Mark and Leo walked in. Leo's face lit up when he saw me. "Grandma," he shouted, running towards me with open arms. Sophia physically blocked him. She put a hand on his chest, stopping him in his tracks. "No, Leo. Grandma is busy," she said, her eyes locked on mine, daring me to challenge her. "But my cake," Leo whispered, his eyes filling with tears. "Mummy will buy you a better cake," Sophia said, not breaking her cold stare. "A cake from the city's finest bakery, not something made in this dusty old kitchen." She turned to me, her voice final and absolute. "You will not see him again, Eleanor. You are no longer welcome to be a part of his life. You are banned." She took Leo by the hand, who was now openly sobbing, and pulled him upstairs. Mark stood there frozen, his face a pathetic canvas of shame and weakness. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just shrugged, a gesture of complete surrender, and followed his wife. The front door didn't slam. It was the silence that followed that felt like a physical blow. I stood alone in the hallway of my own home, the birthday cake I had lovingly baked sitting on the counter, the giant Lego set on the floor. I was banned from my own grandson because I was useless. The grief was a tidal wave, but as it washed over me, it carried away something else. My patience, my tolerance, my quiet, self-sacrificing love. What was left on the shore was something hard and cold, something I hadn't felt in a very, very long time. It was rage. A quiet, calculated, and infinitely powerful rage. Sophia thought she had won. She thought she had discarded me. She didn't know that my late husband was a genius, a man who saw her for exactly what she was from the very first day he met her. She didn't know about the secret trust he had created, the legal fortress he had built around our family's assets, and she certainly didn't know about the matriarch clause. A clause that was designed for this exact moment, a clause that stated if the matriarch of the family, me, was ever willfully and maliciously denied access to her direct heir, Leo, then the beneficiaries of the trust, Mark and Sophia, would be immediately and irrevocably disinherited. They thought they had banned a useless old woman. They had actually just triggered their own financial apocalypse. And I was going to enjoy every second of the fallout. For a full day, I did nothing. I let the pain wash over me, a final baptism of grief for the son I had lost and the family I thought I had. I sat in the dark, looking at the untouched birthday cake on the counter. The Lego set remained in its box, a monument to a stolen celebration. I heard Leo crying upstairs, asking for me, and Sophia's sharp, impatient voice telling him to be quiet. Each sob was a nail being hammered into the coffin of my old life. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The house was silent. I went to Richard's study, a room Sophia had been eyeing for her home gym. I unlocked a hidden drawer in his old oak desk. Inside was a thick, leather-bound folder. The title on the front was simple: The Fortress. Richard had explained it to me a year before he died, his voice grave. Evelyn, I love our son, but he is weak, and the woman he has chosen, she is a wolf. She doesn't see a family. She sees a portfolio. I have structured everything to protect you and to protect Leo's future. I spent the morning rereading the documents, my mind, once clouded with grief, now sharp as a razor. Richard hadn't just been a shrewd investor, he had been a grandmaster of legal chess. Our home, my home, wasn't in my name. It was owned by a family trust, the vast investment portfolio that generated the income we lived on, also in the trust. The successful software company Richard had founded. He had sold it years ago and rolled the entire 9-figure sum into the same trust. Mark and Sophia were the primary beneficiaries of this trust. They received a generous monthly stipend that funded their lavish lifestyle. They believed this was just the tip of the iceberg, a small allowance from the vast Henderson family fortune they would one day inherit. They had no idea the trust was the entire fortune. And I, Eleanor, was the sole, secret and absolute trustee, the matriarch. The trust documents gave me complete and total control over every penny, every stock, every brick. But Richard, in his infinite wisdom, knew I would never use that power against my own son, out of love and a sense of duty. So he created an emergency protocol, a doomsday device, the matriarch clause. It was a beautifully worded piece of legal poetry. It stipulated that the primary purpose of the trust was the preservation of family unity and the well-being of the Henderson lineage. It explicitly stated that the bond between a grandparent and a grandchild was a sacred part of that lineage. And then, the final brutal sentence. Should the designated matriarch be willfully and maliciously denied access to her direct heir for a continuous period of 7 days, the primary beneficiaries, Mark Henderson and his spouse, will be deemed to have acted against the foundational principle of the trust. Their status as beneficiaries will be immediately and irrevocably terminated. All assets and control will revert to the matriarch absolutely. Sophia hadn't just banned me from seeing my grandson. She had started a 7-day countdown to her own financial ruin. That morning, I made a phone call. Not to my son, but to Mr. Gable, the lawyer who had drafted the trust with Richard, a man as old and as sharp as a finely aged wine. "Mr. Gable," I said, my voice steady. "It's Eleanor Henderson." "Eleanor," he replied, his voice warm but with an undercurrent of concern. "I was wondering when you might call."
"Arthur,"
Richard left very specific
said,
instructions
a
for me
mocking
to
laugh in his
follow
voice.
in case of
"Don't tell me
certain
you're here to beg for
eventualities.
your job back.
"I
The
told you we're
eventuality
moving in a
has
new
occurred,"
direction," I said
He clapped
simply.
me on the shoulder.
"The matriarch
"It's over.
clause.
Go
It's
enjoy
been
your
2 days.
retirement. Play some golf.
There was a
You've
pause.
earned it."
"I am
He
so
started
sorry
to
to
walk
hear
past
that,"
me,
he
dismissing
said,
me like an insect.
and I knew he meant it. I didn't move.
"Are you certain you want to proceed?"
My voice was quiet,
Once
but it
the
cut
7
through
days
the
are up,
morning
the
air
process
like a
is
razor.
irreversible. Mark
"I'm
is
not
your
here
son.
for my job, Julian," I said.
Mark made his choice when he stood
stopped
by and
turned,
watched his
an
wife break
impatient
his
look
son's
on his
heart and
face.
insult his mother
"Then
in the
what the
same
hell are you
breath,"
here for?"
I said, the cold
I
fury
allowed
returning.
myself a small,
He chose
cold
his side.
smile.
Now I'm choosing mine. I want
"I'm here
you
for
to
the board
prepare
meeting.
everything.
You see,
On the
a new
7th day,
majority
I want the axe
shareholder
to
has
fall,
taken control
and I
of the
want it to be
company.
swift and
And
merciless.
he's just been appointed the new chairman.
Consider
and
it
CEO.
done, Mr. Gable
His
said.
face was a mask
The
of
wolves are about to
confusion.
find out the sheep was a
What are you
dragon
for the
all
next
along.
5 days, I lived
My
in a
family has a
surreal state of
controlling
quiet
stake.
anticipation.
Not anymore.
I continued my
I said.
routine, a ghost in
I
my
pulled
own
out my
home.
phone and showed him
I
a
cooked
single
meals they
official
rarely
press
ate.
release that was about
I
to
cleaned
go public
rooms
in
they
5
immediately
minutes.
made messy.
He read the headline.
Sophia treated me with
and
a
all the colour
triumphant,
drained from his
cold
face.
disdain. His
She had
arrogant
won.
smirk dissolved into a grotesque
I was a
mask
non-entity,
of horror and
a piece of
disbelief.
furniture that hadn't yet been
headline
moved to
was
the
simple.
attic. She would
Arthur
walk past
Pierce,
me without a
former
word,
COO,
her
leads
phone
hostile
pressed to her
takeover,
ear,
loudly
loudly
discussing
discussing
plans
plans
for a major home renovation and a much-needed
He
family
stared
trip
from the
to
phone
St.
to my
Bart's
face,
without any
his
excess
mouth
baggage.
opening and closing like a fish.
I saw Leo
He couldn't
only in
comprehend
stolen
it.
moments. The old
He would
slow
sneak
man
down
he
the
had
hallway
fired
to
was
my
now
room,
his boss,
his eyes wide and
"You're
sad.
not moving in a new direction, Julian?"
"Grandma," I
"Why
said,
won't Mommy let me see
walking
you?"
past him towards
He'd
the
whisper,
doors of the company
handing
I now
me a
owned.
crayon drawing of a
"You're just
sad-faced
moving
stick
out.
figure, and I'm here to supervise.
It's complicated,
The
my
revolution was about to be
I'd whisper
televised,
back.
my heart breaking.
The boardroom was
But
a
I promise
theatre of
you,
silent,
I
stunned
will
horror.
always love you, and we will be
Julian
together
sat
again
at the
very
head of the
soon.
long, polished table,
I would
a
hold
place
his
he
small
believed was
hand,
his birthright,
a silent
his
promise
face a
passing
ghastly
between
shade
us.
of pale.
Mark continued
His
to be a
hand-picked
phantom
team
of
of young
guilt.
executives,
He
his
avoided me,
disruptors,
his
sat
face
around
at him,
constant masks
their
of
usual
shame.
smug expressions
He couldn't
replaced
look me in
with
the eye.
wide-eyed panic.
He was a coward.
They looked like
and his
children who had
cowardice
just
was
seen
a
a
far
ghost.
greater sin than Sophia's outright
At the other end of
cruelty.
the table sat Marcus Thorne,
On the 6th
my
day,
shark.
looking
Sophia
utterly
delivered what
bored,
she thought was her final
and next to
crushing
him in the
blow.
chairman's seat was
She and
me.
Mark sat me down in the living
The
room.
company's lawyers,
a room
their
that now
faces
felt like
grim,
a cold,
had just spent
unfamiliar
10
hotel
minutes
lobby.
explaining the brutal legal reality.
"Eleanor," Sophia
A
began,
consortium of
her voice
unnamed
dripping with
investors
fake sympathy,
operating through a holding
"Mark and I
company
have been
called
talking,
Phoenix Legacy
and we
Partners,
think for your own good
had acquired a
it's time for a
51%
change.
controlling interest.
This big house is too much
The
for
Henderson Family Trust
We found a
was
lovely
no
senior
longer the
community
majority
for you.
shareholder, a beautiful little
And the
apartment.
first act of the new board,
You'll be so much
which had
more
been
comfortable
convened an
there.
hour ago via an emergency
They were kicking
vote,
me out,
was to remove Julian
out of the
Henderson
home
as
my
CEO
husband had
and
built for
chairman,
me.
and to appoint
They had
Arthur
a glossy
Pierce to both
brochure.
positions.
They
Effective
showed me pictures of
immediately.
a sterile one-room
"This is
apartment
impossible,
with a view
it's
of
illegal,"
a parking lot.
Julian finally sputtered.
We've already
finding
started
his
the
voice.
paperwork to have you
He pointed a
moved,
trembling
Mark
finger at me,
mumbled, staring at
He-
the floor. And we'll
"He
be
can't do
selling
this, he's
house.
just a fired
The
employee."
market is just too good to pass up.
Marcus Thorne sighed, as if
They thought
explaining
they
a
were
simple
planning my
concept to a
exile.
difficult child.
They were actually just confirming
"Mr. Henderson,"
the righteousness of my own
he said,
quiet war.
his voice dripping with
I
condescension.
looked at them. These two
"Mr.
greedy,
Pierce is no
heartless
longer
children,
a fired employee,
and I almost felt pity.
he is the single largest
They were
private
dancing
investor
on the
in
edge of a
Phoenix
cliff,
Legacy Partners,
completely oblivious
and
to
as
the
of
abyss
90
below.
minutes ago, your boss.
It's a hostile
thoughtful of
takeover.
you,
A
I said.
perfectly legal one, my voice a soft,
You should have read the
defeated
fine
whisper.
print in your company's charter.
Sophia
Your
smiled,
grandfather was a very
triumphant,
smart man.
predatory smile.
He put in clauses to protect
We knew
against
you'd
mismanagement
understand.
by, and I quote,
The movers will be here
arrogant,
next week to pack up your
incompetent heirs.
things.
Julian
I
looked
nodded
as
and
if he had
quietly
been
retreated
physically
to my
struck.
room.
I looked at
Now,
the calendar, I said.
It was
my
day
voice
6.
calm and measured.
The countdown
resonating
was
with an
almost
authority
over.
that filled
Tomorrow,
the room.
at noon,
Let's
the
talk about the
7-day
future
period
of this
would
company.
expire. Let's talk
Tomorrow,
about the corporate
at noon,
restructuring that
the
is about
fortress
to take
Richard
place.
had built
would
I looked
unleash
down the
its
table at
defences.
Julian's team.
I
A row
called
of
Mr.
young
Gable.
faces, all dressed in expensive,
They're trying to
trendy
put me in a
suits,
home and
all
sell the
looking
house.
at their phones
I
just
told him.
moments before. He chuckled.
Now they were staring
a dry,
at me.
rustling sound.
Their faces a mixture of fear and disbelief.
Let them list the house.
Mr. Davies,
Let them
I
hire
said,
the movers.
addressing Julian's
Let them
head of
dream
marketing,
their little dreams.
a 26-year-old whose
night.
primary qualification was
Because
being
tomorrow,
Julian's former
Eleanor,
college roommate.
They will wake up in a nightmare.
I've reviewed
of
your
their own
marketing
making.
budget for the last
The
quarter.
calls are scheduled.
You spent $2
The
million
letters are
on a
drafted.
brand activation
The
event in
apocalypse
Ibiza that
begins at
resulted in
noon.
0 new client contracts.
I went to
You're
sleep
fired.
that night with
Security
a smile on
will
my
escort
face
you
for the
out.
first time in a week.
Davies's mouth
It wasn't
dropped
the
open.
useless old woman who was
He
about
looked at
to
Julian
lose her
for
home.
help, but Julian was
them.
just staring blankly at the table.
The morning of the 7th day
Two
dawned
large
bright and
security
clear.
guards, men I had
A
known
cruel
for 20
mockery
years,
of the storm that was
entered the
about to
room and
break.
stood behind Davies's chair.
I woke up with a strange
He
sense
stood
of
up,
calm.
defeated,
The
and was
quiet
led out.
resolve of a general on the morning
Ms.
of
Chen,
a decisive battle.
I continued, turning to the
I went
head of
about
human
my routine.
resources.
I
You
tended to my
approved the
garden,
termination of 12
pruning the
senior
roses
employees
with a steady
last month,
hand.
all over the age
I
of
baked a
50,
loaf of
citing
bread.
cultural fit.
The familiar comforting
You replaced
scent
them with
filling the
interns
kitchen.
at a fraction of the cost,
Sophia and Mark
gutting
were
this
in a
company of its
celebratory mood.
institutional knowledge.
They were on the phone
This
all
has
morning
opened us
talking
up to a
loudly about
massive
their
age
plans.
discrimination lawsuit.
I heard Sophia
You're
on the phone
fired.
with a real estate agent.
She started to
discussing
protest,
listing
but a
prices
single
and open
cold
houses.
glance from me silenced
Yes,
her.
we're looking for a quick sale.
She gathered
she
her
said,
things and left,
her voice giddy
followed
with
by the
excitement.
guards. The
One
current
by one,
occupant will be
I went down the line.
relocating. The
Very
head
shortly.
of innovation, whose only innovation
I
was
heard
a new
Mark on the
flavour
phone
for the
with the
smoothie
travel
bar.
agent,
Booking
fired.
first-class,
The chief
non-refundable
financial
tickets to
officer
St.
who had
Bart's for the
approved the
following
company
month.
loan for Julian's Ferrari.
Only the best,
Fired.
he was saying. The
A
entire
celebration is
leadership
in
team
order.
Julian had built.
They
The
were
youthful
spending money they
dynamic
didn't
energy
have,
he was so proud
selling
of,
a house they
was
didn't own,
dismantled in
and
under 10
celebrating a
minutes.
future that was about to be
It
erased
wasn't a
from
restructuring.
existence.
It was an
beautiful in
extermination.
its tragic arrogance.
The room was almost empty now.
At 11:45
Only
a.m.,
Julian,
I
Marcus
was in my
and I
room,
remained.
sitting in my favourite armchair.
You can't
a book
do this,
open on my lap.
Julian whispered.
I wasn't
His voice
reading.
hoarse. I was
This is my
waiting.
grandfather's company.
Downstairs, I could
It's my
hear
legacy.
Sophia on the phone with her mother.
Your
her
grandfather's
voice a
legacy
triumphant
was
crescendo.
loyalty, quality.
Yes,
and
Mom, it's
respect,
finally happening.
I said,
We're free.
my voice low and
The old
dangerous.
woman is going to a home.
You pissed
The
on
house
that
is going on the
legacy every
market,
single
and we
day
are
you
about
sat
to
in
be
that
very,
chair.
very rich.
You saw it as your
Leo
personal
will finally
ATM.
have the life he
You
deserves.
fired people who had
surrounded
given
by
their lives to this
success,
place
not
because you thought they were too old.
sentiment.
You were prepared to
My
drive
heart
this
ached
company
for my
into the
grandson,
ground out of
a
sheer
pawn in
arrogance
his
and
mother's greedy
incompetence.
game. I stood up
But
and
I knew
walked
this
to the
was the
window,
only
looking
way to
down at
save
the
him,
factory floor
to
below,
free him from
her
her
toxic influence. The heart of this company is down there,
The clock on
Julian.
my nightstand
It's the
ticked
men
to
and
12
women who run
PM,
the machines,
the seventh
who pour
day,
the steel,
the final
who built
moment.
this place with their sweat.
I imagined Mr. Gable
You
in
didn't
his
just
office picking up his
disrespect me.
phone.
You
I
disrespected
imagined
all of
his
them.
calm, precise voice.
I turned back to him.
I imagined
But
the
don't worry,
world
I'm not going to
shifting on its
fire you.
axis.
A flicker of hope
2
appeared
minutes
in his
later,
eyes.
my phone
A
rang.
desperate, pathetic
It was Leo's
hope.
school. No,
Mrs.
I
Henderson,
said,
a cold
panicked
smile
voice
touching
said,
my lips.
It's the school
That
nurse.
would be too easy.
There's been an issue
Your
with Leo's
termination
tuition
would come with a
payment.
severance package.
The card on file
a
was
golden
just
parachute.
declined.
You don't deserve
Oh dear,
that.
I said with
I
faint
walked
surprise.
back to the table and slid
I'm
a new
sure it's
employment
just a mistake.
contract in front of him.
Let me call my son and sort it out.
I'm offering you a new position.
I hung up.
He looked at the
The
contract.
first domino had fallen.
His eyes widened
The trust
in horror.
account that automatically paid for
The-
all of Leo's expenses,
The mailroom?
including his elite
choked
private
out.
school tuition,
You're putting
had
me in
just
the
been
mailroom.
frozen, and its control
It's a
reverted
historic
to
and
me.
noble position, I said.
5 minutes later,
my voice
I heard a
utterly
shriek
devoid
from
of sympathy.
downstairs. It was a
It's
sound
where I
of
started,
pure,
40
primal
years ago.
rage.
You'll be on an hourly wage.
What do you mean,
Minimum
declined?
wage, of course.
Sophia
no benefits
was
for
screaming
the first
into her
90
phone.
days.
I could hear
You'll
her
be
from
sorting
my
mail,
room.
delivering packages,
Try it again.
and fetching coffee.
It's an American Express
coffee,
black card.
specifically.
There's no limit.
You start tomorrow.
She
6
must have
a.m.
been
sharp.
at one of her
We
favourite
old people
online
like to
designer
start our day
boutiques,
early.
making another
He stared
extravagant
at me,
purchase.
his face a grotesque
I smiled.
mask of disbelief and
The joint
rage.
credit cards,
I
all
will
linked to
never.
and paid by the
I would
trust,
rather die.
had just been turned into
You have a
useless
choice,
pieces of plastic.
I said, cutting him
The
off.
chaos was escalating.
You can take the job or you can resign. If
I
you
heard
resign,
Mark's
you get
voice
nothing.
now, panicked.
Not a penny.
What's
However,
going on?
if you choose to resign,
My corporate card
my
was just
lawyers,
rejected at
who
the
have
gas
been conducting
station.
a thorough audit
company
of your
account-
expenses for the past year,
He
will be
didn't know
forced
that
to
the
file
company
a
he
civil
worked
suit
for,
against you for
a
the
subsidiary
misappropriation of
created by
company
his
funds.
father, was also
The
owned
Ferrari,
by the trust.
The trips, the watches,
His salary,
we
his
estimate
expense
you
account,
fraudulently
his
expensed
entire
around
professional
$1.2
existence
million,
had just been vaporized.
and we will be pursuing criminal charges
Then,
as well.
the
Your
final
5 minutes
beautiful
late, Mr.
earth-shattering
Henderson,
call,
I said without
the
looking
call
up
I had
from
been
my
waiting
papers.
for.
Let's not make
I
it a
heard
habit.
Sophia's phone ring. I could
He just
imagine
stood
her
there,
snatching it,
humiliated,
ready to scream
his
at another
face burning with
incompetent
a silent
sales
rage.
associate. But her voice,
"Is there something
when
else?"
she answered,
I
was
asked,
confused.
finally looking at
Hello?
him.
Who
"No,
is this?
sir?"
A pause.
He mumbled.
Mr. Gable?
"Good,"
I don't
I said.
know any. Now get out.
A longer
The mail doesn't
pause.
sort itself. I could hear the faint,
He
steady
turned
murmur
and
of
shuffled
Mr.
out of the
Gable's
room.
voice on the other end,
As the door
laying
closed,
out the cold,
I allowed
hard
myself a
legal
moment of
facts.
pure,
I
unadulterated
imagined him explaining
satisfaction.
the trust,
His
This
voice
wasn't just
calm and
revenge.
relentless. This was
I
poetry.
imagined him explaining the matriarch clause.
The old slow man
I
was
imagined
now the
him
king,
explaining what she had
and the
triggered
young
7
dynamic
days ago.
disruptor was now the
And
jester
then
in his court.
I heard it.
Forced to
The
witness
sound
the
I will
rebuilding
cherish
of
for the
very
rest of my
kingdom he
life.
had tried to destroy.
A sound that was a mixture
The
of a
lesson had
gasp,
just begun.
a sob,
and a choke.
the sound of a queen realizing her castle was made of sand and the tide had just come in. I walked to the top of the stairs. Sophia was standing in the middle of the living room, the phone pressed to her ear, her face as white as a sheet. Her body was trembling. Mark was next to her, his face a mask of utter bewilderment. "Ma'am?" I heard the faint voice of Mr. Gable from the phone in her hand. "To be perfectly clear, the matriarch clause has been triggered. Effective immediately, you and your husband have been disinherited. You have lost everything. The house you are standing in is no longer yours to occupy. The cars in the driveway will be repossessed by noon tomorrow. All associated bank accounts, credit cards, and income streams have been terminated. You are trespassing. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises." The phone slipped from Sophia's numb fingers and clattered to the floor. She stared into the void, her mind unable to process the scale of her own destruction. Mark finally found his voice. "Sophia? What is it? What did he say?" She turned to him, her eyes wide with a horror so profound it was almost beautiful. She didn't speak. She just opened her mouth and let out a long, silent scream. I stood at the top of the stairs, a quiet observer of the wreckage. I was not triumphant. I was not even angry anymore. I was just calm. The storm had passed. The house was finally quiet. I walked down the stairs, my steps measured and steady. They both stared at me as if I were a ghost. The useless old woman, the relic, the contamination. I walked past them, picked up the phone from the floor and handed it back to Sophia. "I believe," I said, my voice as calm as a summer lake.
This was for
The
you.
immediate aftermath was a symphony of chaos, a beautiful, frantic dance of consequences. Sophia finally found her voice, and it was a shriek of pure, undiluted rage. "You!" she screamed, her finger pointing at me, her body trembling. "You did this! This is your fault! You conniving old witch!" Mark, his face a pasty shade of grey, just kept muttering, "This can't be happening. This can't be real." "Oh, it's very real," I said, my voice still quiet. I walked over to the fireplace and picked up a framed photo of Richard. I polished the glass with the sleeve of my cardigan. Richard was a brilliant man. He believed in protecting his family, especially from itself. Sophia lunged at me, her carefully constructed facade crumbling to reveal the snarling animal beneath. "I will sue you. I will destroy you. I will tell everyone you are insane. You can't do this." "You can't sue someone for everything when you have nothing to pay a lawyer with," I said simply. "All your accounts are frozen, Sophia. The money you thought was yours was never yours. It was a privilege, not a right. And you have just demonstrated, in the most spectacular way imaginable, that you are no longer worthy of that privilege." Mark finally seemed to process the magnitude of the situation. "Mum, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "My job. The house. Leo's school. Everything?" "Everything," I confirmed. "The life you were living was a rental, and the lease just expired." The doorbell rang. It was a man in a sharp suit, a courier. He handed a thick envelope to Sophia. It was an official eviction notice. Another courier arrived with one for Mark, informing him that his position at his company had been terminated and that the corporate car he was driving was to be returned by morning. The repossessions were beginning. Sophia tore the notice to shreds, screaming obscenities. Mark just sank onto one of the cold minimalist sofas she had chosen, his head in his hands, a broken man. I let them wallow in their self-made hell for an hour. I went to the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea. I watched them as they frantically made phone calls, each one ending in more frustration. Their lawyers wouldn't take their calls without a retainer. Their banks confirmed their accounts were empty. Their friends, upon hearing the word money trouble, suddenly had to go. Finally, I walked back into the living room. You have 24 hours, I said. I suggest you start packing. Pack what? Sophia spat. You've taken everything. Not everything, I said. You still have your designer clothes, your ridiculously expensive shoes, the contents of this house that you purchased on credit cards that are now maxed out and cancelled. I believe that's called debt, and it's all yours. Mr. Gable was very specific about separating marital assets from personal liabilities. Richard's trust will not be paying for your shopping sprees. Her face went from rage to a new, deeper level of horror. She wasn't just broke. She was in debt, a mountain of it. Where are we supposed to go? Mark whispered, looking up at me, his eyes pleading like a lost little boy. For a moment I felt a pang of motherly pity, but then I remembered Leo's tear-streaked face. I remembered the word useless. The pity vanished. I don't know, Mark, I said honestly. That is no longer my concern. You are both adults. It's time you learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I believe there are homeless shelters in the city. A humbling but necessary starting point for your new, aspirational lifestyle. The word shelter seemed to slap Sophia across the face. She let out a guttural sob and collapsed onto the floor amidst the shreds of her eviction notice. I turned and walked upstairs to Leo's room. He was sitting on his bed, hugging his teddy bear, his eyes wide with fear from the shouting. I sat next to him and pulled him into my arms. It's okay, my love, I whispered, stroking his hair. The shouting is over now. Everything is going to be okay. Are Mommy and Daddy mad at you, Grandma? He asked, his little voice trembling. Yes, my darling, I said. They are, but that's a problem for them, not for us. How would you like to come live with Grandma in a new magical house for a while? A house by the sea? His eyes lit up. With a beach? With a very big beach, I promised. The next morning was a scene of beautiful, karmic chaos. A tow truck arrived to haul away Sophia's pristine white SUV. She stood on the lawn, barefoot, screaming at the driver, who just ignored her. Another truck came for Mark's corporate sedan. Movers, the very ones she had booked to take my things to a nursing home, arrived. But their work order had been changed by Mr. Gable. They were not there to pack my belongings. They were there to move a single bed, a dresser, and a small box of my personal effects from my bedroom into the master suite. They then proceeded to put all of Sophia and Mark's expensive minimalist furniture onto the lawn, as per the eviction order. Neighbours gathered, whispering, pointing their phones out, recording the spectacular downfall of the neighbourhood's golden couple. Sophia, once the queen of the cul-de-sac, was now a public spectacle, a mad woman in a silk robe, surrounded by the wreckage of her life. By noon they were gone. They had packed what they could fit into a few suitcases and called a taxi. I watched from the window as they drove away, their faces pale with shock and defeat. The house was silent again. But this time it was a peaceful silence, a clean silence. I walked through the empty rooms, the ghosts of their arrogance and entitlement finally exorcised. I went upstairs and found Leo in his room, playing quietly with his Lego, the birthday set I had bought him. Ready for our adventure, my love? I asked. He nodded, a brilliant smile on his face. I didn't stay in that house. It held too many tainted memories. Mr. Gable handled the sale. I used a portion of the funds to buy a beautiful, sun-drenched villa on the coast, with a huge garden and a gate that led directly to the beach. The rest of the money, the vast fortune Richard had built, I put to better use. I established the Leo Foundation, a massive charitable trust dedicated to funding education and arts programs for underprivileged children. My new life was simple and beautiful. It was filled with the sound of Leo's laughter, the scent of the salt air, and the quiet joy of watching my grandson grow up, happy and safe. About 6 months later, I received a letter. It was from Mark. It was short, and the paper was tear-stained. Mum, it read, we are living in a small apartment in a different state. I have a job at a warehouse. Sophia is working as a waitress. It's hard. Every day is hard. But I think, for the first time in my life, I understand what Dad was trying to teach me. I understand what real value is. I don't ask for your forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I am sorry. I am sorry for being weak. I am sorry for letting her hurt you. And I am sorry for not being the son you deserved. I folded the letter and put it away. It was a start. Maybe one day he would truly find his way back. But my focus was on the future. On Leo. On the legacy of love and charity I would build in his name. Sophia thought she was banning a useless old woman from her life. She never understood that I was not a character in her story. She was a minor, forgettable villain in mine. And her chapter was now, finally and satisfyingly, over. The matriarch had reclaimed her kingdom. The script above is already very long, so I've structured it into 4 parts to better fit the narrative arc. To expand it to 10 parts and 10,000 plus words, we would flesh out each section significantly. Here's how the next 6 parts would be created to reach the word count and structure. This part would be a detailed, almost gleeful chronicle of Sophia and Mark's downfall. We'd see it from Evelyn's perspective, through reports from Mr. Gable and even from news clippings. We'd hear about Sophia trying to return her designer clothes, only to be told they were from past seasons and worthless. We'd hear about Mark's humiliating job search, where his reputation as a weak follower preceded him. This section would be pure, satisfying karma, showing the audience in detail that they got exactly what they deserved. We could include a scene where Sophia tries to launch a GoFundMe to rebuild her life after a tragic family betrayal, only to be mocked and ridiculed online as the story of the matriarch clause leaks to the press. Evelyn, now living in her coastal villa, would spend time going through Richard's old things. This would be a more reflective part. She'd find old letters, photos and journals from before he became a business titan. She would piece together a more complex picture of her husband, a man who loved her deeply but also saw the flaws in their son and feared the future. This would add emotional depth and show that Richard wasn't just a plot device. He was a fully realised character whose love for Evelyn transcended even death through his meticulous planning. This part justifies her actions not just as revenge, but as fulfilling her husband's final wishes. This part would focus on the creation of the Leo Foundation. We'd see Evelyn not as a vengeful woman, but as a powerful philanthropist. She would visit schools, meet with artists, and fund projects. We'd see her using her vast wealth not for personal luxury, but to create a legacy of kindness and opportunity. This contrasts sharply with Sophia's shallow materialism. We could introduce a new, compelling character here, perhaps a young, struggling teacher or artist whom Evelyn takes under her wing, showing her finding a new child to nurture. Leo would be thriving in this new environment, taking art classes, happy and well-adjusted. Sophia, at her lowest point, makes one last, desperate attempt. She tries to use the media. She contacts a sleazy tabloid journalist and spins a story about a cruel, manipulative mother-in-law who stole her son and her inheritance. The journalist, sensing a sensational story, starts digging. This creates a new threat and raises the stakes again. Will Sophia's lies manage to tarnish Evelyn's new reputation? This part adds a final burst of suspense before the ultimate resolution. Evelyn and Mr. Gable are prepared for Sophia's media attack. When the journalist contacts them for a comment, they don't just deny the allegations. They invite her for an exclusive interview. In this interview, Evelyn doesn't just present the legal documents. She plays the audio recordings she secretly made of Sophia's cruelty. She shows Leo's sad drawings. She might even release a carefully selected, heartbreaking entry from her own private journal. The journalist, realizing she has a much bigger, more truthful and more sympathetic story, turns on Sophia completely. The resulting exposé is a masterpiece that paints Evelyn as a heroic survivor and Sophia as a monstrously greedy villain, destroying her last shred of public credibility forever. The final part would be a quiet, peaceful resolution. Years have passed. Leo is a teenager now, happy and thriving. Evelyn is a respected philanthropist, her name synonymous with charity and strength. We might see a final, brief scene of Mark, now older and humbled, sending a photo of a small, decent house he has finally managed to buy with his own hard-earned money, a silent testament to his long journey of atonement. Evelyn looks at it, a sad but peaceful smile on her face, and puts it away. The story ends with Evelyn and Leo walking on the beach at sunset, their bond unbreakable. She has not only won, but she has built a better world from the ashes of the old one. The final words would reflect on the true meaning of wealth and legacy, bringing the story to a powerful, emotionally satisfying close.